So today we're looking at text 7.2 by Jessica Reed, experience I survived an earthquake while scuba diving. So in terms of the gap then, obviously this is a piece of reportage. This is a printed and online piece of reportage. The audience is going to be primarily Guardian readers, but it's important to note that this is from the Guardian Weekend magazine. So slightly more informal than the sort of broadsheet newspaper, which definitely comes through in the type of voice that we've got here. Other people who might read it would be fans and followers of Jessica Reed, or perhaps those with an interest in scuba diving. The purpose of this is to inform but also to entertain, and that really comes through in the kind of descriptive sensory writing that we see in the voice. As we go through, I've kind of color coded 3 different types of lexis. So in orange we've got the semantic field of sensors, and I've particularly highlighted the sound because the sort of the sound sensors really come through as part of the voice. And then we've also got lexis drawn from natural disasters. Okay, it is a reflective retrospective account phrased in the past tense as she looks back on this experience, and it follows a linear structure with a short introduction. We again get the main body and a conclusion towards the end. So let's have a look at this opening paragraph. I've been scuba diving for 15 years. I love the calmness of being submerged, the hypnotic sound of my breath, and the quiet clicks of fish eating coral. Okay, so we've got these numerals at the beginning and the simple declarative sentence, I've been scuba diving for 15 years. What's important about that is she's foregrounding her experience. So she's making it clear to her readers that she's an experienced scuba diver. And then when we get to the sort of frightening bit where she describes the earthquake, it makes that experience feel more intense and more kind of disastrous and terrifying, because we know that she's an experienced diver and this is really out of the ordinary. We then get this triad of pre-modified nouns here with all of this kind of sensory imagery in. So the calmness of being submerged, the hypnotic sound of my breath, and the quiet clicks of fish eating coral. Now in all of that sensory imagery, it really gives us a kind of calm voice and evokes the calmness that she's describing here of being underwater. So there's something quite soothing about all of those sounds. Even the clicks, which is onomatopoeic, because of the sort of sentence structure, it doesn't feel harsh with those plosive sounds. It kind of fits into this kind of calm atmospheric tone. But this is obviously the sensory imagery that describes the moment before the earthquake. So we start off with a calm voice. And then we get this discourse marker last October. Okay, so that operates for that this is happening during a precise time. Having holiday in the Philippines with a friend. It was a sunny morning. So we've got that kind of adjective as a pre-modifier, which really helps to build a kind of positive atmosphere that fits in with this calm mood that's come beforehand. And after breakfast we boarded the boat with 7 other advanced divers. So again we've got another adjective pre-modifying the noun, and this one is emphasizing the experience of everybody who's involved. We've also got here the lexis of scuba diving, submerged divers. I put on the gear. Again, what that does is it gives a credibility to her voice. We talked about the fact that she's presenting herself as experienced, and that semantic field of scuba diving reinforces experience. So again, we've got the numbers, the facts, emphasising that she's an experienced diver. So I knew the drill. This is a familiar collocation. We all know what this means, so that helps us to understand her level of experience. I put on the gear and dived off the boat. See, this knew the drill and put on the gear is kind of more informal voice, whereas what we then slip into is a more descriptive voice again after this. So she continues to say, I saw luminous corals, languorous turtles silhouetted in the deep blue of the ocean, and hundreds of tropical fish. So we've got another pre-modified triad here, which is really descriptive. And look at all the polysyllabic words. You've got all these really like low frequency words like luminous, languorous, silhouetted, which gives a formality to the voice, but I think also adds to the kind of descriptive nature of the voice and helps us to see the beauty of this underwater world that she's describing. Okay, so the next paragraph starts with another discourse marker after nearly 45 minutes, so giving us a clear sense of the linear narrative and functioning to give some text cohesion. And then the sensory imagery continues. So the sound of my breathing was drowned out by a low rumble like an engine. Now at this point, this sensory imagery causes a change in mood, because we get the simile of it being like an engine, and we get this idea of her breathing being drowned out. So that verb shows us that all of that kind of calmness and the serenity that she was experiencing being underwater, deep, powerful. Again, focusing on the senses here, and we get two adjectives to pre-modify: deep and powerful. So really amplifying the power of the noise, really intensifying our sense of this experience. As if, so another simile, as if a big boat with a propeller was passing overhead. So these kind of similes both operate to show a little bit of her confusion, I think, as well, that initially she doesn't understand what's happening. I looked up but couldn't see anything. The dive instructor's eyes were wide with confusion. He didn't know what was going on either, even though he had done thousands of dives. So we talked about the fact that she presents herself as experienced at the beginning, and what's important about this section is that she's emphasising the uniqueness of this experience for both her and for the dive instructor. And this kind of descriptive moment is really showing us this pervasive of confusion. Nobody understands what's happening. It really creates peril. We swam next to each other, staying close to the side of the reef. So this preposition, next to, shows you that both of them are unsettled by this experience. They know that they're in some peril, and they need the security of being side by side. I couldn't see my friends and the other divers. The situation felt sinister and dangerous. So this is a particularly descriptive bit in this paragraph with these abstract nouns, which are helping us as the reader to understand how unsettling this situation is, and it helps to kind of intensify the feeling of peril. Then we were enveloped by clouds of white sand that mushroomed up around us. So quite kind of a descriptive voice here again. We've got the adjectival verb form of mushroomed, helping us to kind of visualize that, and maybe it's going to give us ideas of like Hiroshima, and it's got those connotations of natural disaster. And then we get this rhetorical question as well. I thought, could it be an underwater bomb? So that's operating to show her kind of confusion and panic. As you know, in the previous paragraph, she was worried that maybe it was an engine or a boat going overhead. Now she's worried it's an underwater bomb. A giant turtle raced past us and into the deep. They're normally slow movers, so this was very weird behaviour. So here we've got some visual sensory imagery, haven't we, about what the animals are doing and how unusual that is. So again, she's observing these details so that we can sense what her confusion was like and the danger that she was encountering. And it was so intense I could feel it in my bones. Well, that wasn't actually. And the sound turned into a deafening roar. Okay, so with that kind of use of sound to the intensity of the experience. And it comes pre-modified with the adjective deafening, okay, to just demonstrate what an incredibly overwhelming experience it was. We move from that to a kind of longer, complex sentence structure. I could see waterfalls of sand pouring over the coral, and on the sea floor a few meters below us cracks began forming, and the sand was sucked down. So all of this longer complex sentence is providing us with more visual imagery, so you could tie that in with the kind of sensory imagery that's in the voice, and it's helping us as the audience to be able to imagine what it was like to be underwater as this earthquake took place. We've got a little bit of lexis of natural disasters with the cracks that form and the earth splintering open, okay, to help us get a sense of the kind of the violence and the destruction of the natural disaster. And then we get this after this longer complex sentence, we get this simple declarative. That's when I realized it was an earthquake. Okay, so it makes sense to have that in a simple declarative because it helps us as the reader to kind of understand that moment of realization. The noise was the sound of the earth splintering open and grinding against itself. So again, a return to sensory images of sound. And we've got the verbs here, splintering and grinding, really helping us to hear those sounds and really showing the kind of violence that was unleashed in the tectonic plates when the earthquake took place. The sounds and vibrations, so again I returned to that sensory imagery, lasted only 2 or 3 minutes, so it felt a lot longer. And when they stopped, I heard the swoosh of sand falling over the seabed. So here we've got some more onomatopoeia here to kind of recreate that sound, but it's a bit gentler, isn't it? The swoosh of the sand. So slightly kind of returning to more of a sense of calmness after this deafening roar. And then we get this fronted adverbial, uneasily, comfortability. I followed the dialogue through plumes of sand. Okay, so that's a metaphor there, which is helping us through its description to kind of visualize what it was like to see the sand blown up in the air like clouds of smoke or vapor. And again, it kind of returns to those images of natural disaster. Searching for the others, it took enormous willpower to resist the urge to swim to the surface as fast as I could. I think this pre-modifier enormous here is really showing the kind of fear and danger that she's experiencing. You know, she's in a real state of fight or flight panic, and that pre-modification really helps us to see that. But she does resist that urge, and after 5 minutes we saw them about 20 meters away and swam over. So again, you've got this kind of factual voice here which helps us to realize that this is a real account. We all held hands and stopped for 3 minutes to avoid decompression sickness. So we're returning to the semantic field of scuba diving now, which can be fatal. It was a huge relief to see my friends, and we all shared incredulous looks. So here, with the relief and the incredulous looks, we've got the lexis of kind of shock and relief, both kind of operating together, and that functions particularly through the adjectives. Before finally surfacing, pulling out our breathing apparatus and shouting, "What was that?" Okay, so we've got the verb shouting here, which is helping to emphasize the drama and the trauma that they've been through. And the use of reported speech at the end here is also recreating that collective shock, and the fact that it's reported speech really creates a sense of kind of drama as well. Okay, so over on the next page, we get this discourse marker again, that they're back on the boat, and that's really helping the text cohesion and giving it a linear narrative. And then we hear that they rush to check the news. Okay, so that dynamic verb is really showing you those kind of elevated state of kind of tension and shock. They want to find out what's happened. And then we get the lexis of natural disasters coming through in earthquake, epicenter, Richter scale. Okay, and that really works to give it a kind of credible voice. And then we also get some facts here. The fact that it measured 7.2 on the Richter scale, so that's emphasizing the danger for us and the peril that she's experienced. And then we get this reference to Hiroshima, so it released more energy than 30 Hiroshima bombs. Okay, and the assumed knowledge that we all have of Hiroshima is really used to convey that sense of disaster and destruction to her audience. Then we kind of return to the personal, that she's high on adrenaline, feels lucky to have survived, okay? But that's kind of counterbalanced about the number of people who are then injured. So these facts again help to give it a kind of broader context, that we understand it's not just about her personal experience, so that's kind of placed in the context of the other people who experienced the earthquake too. But in her conclusion, she returns to herself. So nearly all of those who died were on the island of Bohol, 30 minutes away. That morning I'd been due to take a boat to hospital there because I had a bad earache. But at the last minute I decided to dive. Had I gone, I would have arrived as the earthquake hit. So we finish with this poignant reminder of how close she was personally to tragedy.